Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All in All with Alex. I'm your host, of course, Alex. Today, we have a very special guest, Miss Kimberly Ward. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just great, Alex. Thanks so much.
That's good. That's good. Well, it is definitely a blessing to have you on the show today. So I want to thank you for taking your time out to come on today.
You bet. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. So before we dive into the questions, can you give the people just a small little background about yourself?
Absolutely. Until 10 years ago, both my husband and I were technical consultants raising our daughter, and we decided to check it all, rent out our house, and go sailing for 2 years. And that's exactly what we did. And when we came back, we were completely changed humans coming back into basically our same lives. We came back to our same house, and our daughter went into the school system she had left. And we realized that our lives didn't really fit us so much anymore. And so I became a writer. I had always done a lot of writing, and I finally decided I had a pretty good story about moving aboard to a boat for 2 years. And my husband and I started an oyster farm. So we have kind of changed our entire lives after this trip.
Okay, so what on the trip, like, was it a defining moment on the trip that happened that made you say that you wanted to do it, or is it just, what inspired you to just do it?
Well, I've always been a writer. I have thousands of pages of journals. I started with diaries when I was a kid, probably as soon as I could form a sentence. So I've always been a writer. I've never shared my writing with anyone. And until I published my book, the only thing I'd ever published were technical papers, white papers that are about as boring as they sound. I never thought I had this great story. And when I came back, I'm like, I have this story, but now I don't really know how to tell it. And I started in a memoir writing course, just a 4-week course that was offered at our library, just happened to be offered when I got back home. And I loved the way the questions teased a story out of me. It's more of a narrative of how we went about this rather than and then we did this, and then we did that, and then we did this, and then we did that. So I hope it gives our readers a little more of a bigger picture of who we are as people. Certainly me, I can't really speak for my husband, although you do get to know his personality a little bit in the book, and my daughter, who, she's her own kid, so I can't really speak for her, but you certainly get to know my personality a little bit more in the book.
Okay. So how did your early travel experiences with your family shape your adventurous spirit?
I just love to go anywhere, anytime. I think the world would be a very boring place if it were filled with a bunch of Kimberlys. And I like to see different color. I like to hear different languages. I like different currencies, using my brain to do the math, to do exchanges in different currencies. And I love different foods. I love different climates. I've never said no to a travel experience. Anytime they came up, I'd figure out money-wise how to make them work.
So can you share a memorable experience from your study abroad in England that influenced your perspective on travel?
My gosh, absolutely. So I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and we're only 4 years youngest to oldest. And so I pretty much always had, a big sister around to blaze a trail for me. I had never really done anything earth-shatteringly new. We were different, unique people, but, I kind of learned from my big sister, and I learned from their friends and things like that. When I got to England, I stayed with a host family. I spent the summer studying Shakespearean literature, which for some may sound insanely boring, but I thought it was thrilling. And I had a passport, I had a train pass and a bus pass, and I had maps. No Google Maps, just regular maps. And it was such a liberating feeling to think, I can go anywhere I want to. And I kept that. I've kept that thought. I do a lot of, I used to before I had a family, but I do a lot of whim travel. If somebody said, hey, I was thinking about going to Florida. So great idea. Where are you going? When are you leaving? Sure, I'll come along. It just gave me that. I'd always been very much of a planner. And so it kind of just looking at a map and saying, I could go out to the Lakes District in England. I could take this bus to this train and take this train out and then another bus. And when I'd be there and, I had all the access in the world. And I think that's how I started to think about travel as kind of unraveling this big world that we live in and making it smaller by going to different places.
Like that. So, how do you feel that your experience as a technical consultant traveling for work differs from your personal travel adventures?
When you travel for work, I don't know if you've ever traveled for work, but it sounds glamorous. Definitely is not glamorous. Pretty much the inside of a hotel room looks like the inside of a hotel room looks like the inside of a hotel room. And same thing when you're in a cubicle sitting at a computer, it all kind of looks the same. I used to be a runner. I now walk a lot because knees don't like the running so much, but I used to be a runner and I would love setting out and trying to come up with different loops of whatever new neighborhood I was in. And I kind of went with my gut feeling. If I, got a bad feeling like maybe I shouldn't be in a specific neighborhood, I'd turn around and leave. I'd listen to my gut has never led me far astray. And I would just go out and I'd find different running courses and I'd make loops and say, oh, I recognize that road name. I wonder if it goes through here. And, so even when I was traveling for work, I would try to get to know my little neighborhood. I always came up with my favorite restaurants and got to know the waiters at the restaurants and like the hostesses, and you become familiar. So even with my work travel, I always made it a little bit where I felt like I got to know the neighborhood where I was living.
So, what motivated you to write Crew of Three, and how did you approach turning your journals into a published book? Well, I guess you kind of already answered that one, but
I did a little bit, but publishing, like writing journals is one thing, deciding that you want to share your story with the world is another. As an independently published author, it's not like I have this giant audience, but even still, it's this, I don't know, it's this need or desire. I think desire is a better word for it, to get to know your readers and have your readers get to know you. Our story was unique. Not that many people move onto a sailboat and, you know, sail off into the sunset for 2 years. So our story was unique, but the idea of wanting to do a big adventure is a very universal. Everybody just says, oh, hey, I wonder what it would be like just to check out a regular life and go, whatever, I don't know, go live in Europe for a couple of years. And so that finding the commonalities, even in this really unique experience, was that drove me in wanting to get to know my readers and wanting to figure out what we had alike.
so in that time frame, so can you discuss some of the challenges and maybe even some of the rewards of homeschooling your daughter while living on a sailboat for those 2 years?
Well, I got to say, I learned an awful lot of history while I was teaching her. I recommend every parent homeschools their kid for a couple of years. First off, you'll have more respect for the teachers than you ever dreamed of. It's not as easy as it seems. Keeping their attention and keeping things on track and all of that good stuff. Absolutely adored it, but I had to let go of my view of what I thought homeschool should look like and let this kind of an organic version emerge. I can remember telling my daughter one time, I'm like, never have talked to Mrs. T like that or Mrs. Sylvester like that. Why on earth would you speak to me like that? Do you need to call me Mrs. Mom? And I knew, I was like, okay, this is a different environment. We're not in a classroom. I don't need to mimic a classroom. So once I let go of what it needed to look like and kind of embraced what it could look like, it was very different. One of the nicest things about homeschooling is the true, like, books learning was really just a couple hours a day. When if you think about in a classroom, there's an awful lot of time managing a classroom, people taking restroom breaks, having lunch, getting into your seats, quieting down. The number of minutes that you're actually learning is really quite small. And so when you're doing it with just one adult and one child, you can do it pretty quickly. And what that did was it opened up this whole world of field trips.
Okay. So Do you feel that your extensive camping experience in the U.S. national parks influenced your approach to other forms of travel?
Although I have to say, extensive camping, I kind of laugh at that because we were in an RV and, like car campers scoff at RVs. You pretty much bring your home with you. I would say, though, that living in an RV is not similar to living on a boat. All of the systems are the same. You generally have propane as a source of heat and cooking, and even refrigeration. You have to fill up your water tanks. And, when you're in an RV, you're obviously looking for potable water sources so that you can fill your tanks. Whereas when we're on a boat, we have a water maker, and it's a desalinating system that takes seawater and um, turns it into drinking water. You have to worry about your power sources and or am I going to use a coffee maker, or am I going to use a French press? Is it worth the amount of power that it takes up? So actually the idea of living in an RV is not dissimilar to a boat. One of the other things, both of them leak from a boat. So they're pretty similar in that way. And one of the things that we discovered as a young family, my husband and I had only been married a year when our daughter was born. So we were a pretty young family when we took off when she was 3, is that we could live in small spaces. And believe it or not, planning for a trip like that is not dissimilar from the project management that we did on our technical consulting world. And so you have, different things you need to do. You have different resources to get them done. How much time are they going to take? How much money will they take? And so it's not a dissimilar planning setup as project management.
Okay. Okay. Um, so what were some of the key lessons you learned from your extended honeymoon sailing through Nova Scotia?
Learned so much I didn't know about living on a boat. I laugh. In fact, I just wrote an article for the Boat Galley where I provide some online content. And I just wrote an article about like confidence when cruising. And one of the things that I said was those first 6 weeks that I spent on a boat with my husband shortly after getting married, I was clueless. I had no idea. I didn't even know it was like what we were doing was called cruising. And he did everything. He'd been single-handing his entire life. He'd always had boats that he was able to manage on his own. And so it was just kind of like having companionship for him. And he was still single-handing. And so I really learned what I didn't know. Again, I learned that I could live in a small space with my husband. We still liked each other. In fact, we still loved each other and wanted to spend time together when we were finished.
That's good. That's good. Sometimes you would think people, being in a tight space for that long when it's like, no form of separation really that you'll get tired of each other. So that's actually
Yep.
good.
Yeah, it does. It magnifies any fissures in a relationship. And I've talked about this a bit as I promoted my book is the divorce rate is pretty high. Like we had 5 kid boats that we traveled together for a pretty significant amount of time, and 2 of the 5 didn't make it marriage wise. And so it's not dissimilar to the rate of divorce on land, but not everybody makes it.
So there were more couples that went on the same ride, same trip as you.
Well, you all do your own thing. But when you have a child on board, like kids navigate or gravitate towards each other. And so if you're ever going in the same areas, you'll end up, a kid boat. Where are you guys heading next? And you may make some plans together. So it's not like you set out together and you spend all of your time. There's also a period of time during hurricane season that most insurance companies require you to stay. It's below a degrees of latitude. So it's 12 degrees of latitude, which is on the southern tip of Grenada. And that was the reason that was our destination. So during the Atlantic hurricane season, pretty much from, as we got down there in August. So like August through October or November, you'll find like 200 or 300 boats in a specific area down there. And so it's like having an old fashioned neighborhood. The kids ranged in age from like, 6 or 7 to 18, 19, and there were about 30, 35 kids. And they all hung together. Like the big kids would take care of the littles, and the medium kids would keep the almost grown kids from, running off and causing any trouble together. And it was just really fun.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. That's a lot of boats too.
And you have no idea of the community that's out there, like until you go. I certainly didn't.
Yeah,
That was a big surprise to me.
yeah. I can only imagine. I can only imagine. So, how do you balance your love for travel with your current life working on an oyster farm in Massachusetts?
It's a constant struggle. We have actually set up our world. Our daughter or the 10-year-old that we took sailing 10 years ago is now 20, and she is in university. So we've got an empty nest now. My mom passed away, and I was caregiving for her for a number of years after we came back. So we truly have an empty nest now. And what we have done is we've arranged our oystering world to be a 9-month adventure. We start in April and usually wrap up right around the first of the year after the holidays. And we are now going back and forth to our boat. Our boat lives in Florida. She moved down there last year. And we are able to take 3 months and go to the Bahamas during that off time of oyster farming. So it's, and there's always more places we want to go, and not enough time, not enough money to do it all, but we try and squeeze stuff in.
Yeah, but I mean, to be able to pretty much, have 3 months off every year to try to visit some new place, or either even if you just go to the Bahamas every time. I mean, it's still experience, to be able to have that 3 month vacation that most people probably would never get.
Exactly. I was going to say, I don't complain at all. It's a unique lifestyle, and I wouldn't trade it now for anything in the world.
So 2 years on a boat, that's, when you see a lot of movies and you see about a whole bunch of storms and boats getting flipped over and things of that nature. So I know it had to be very scary for you all because, you know, a freshly married couple, 1 year old, well, no, 3 year old daughter, right, at the time, right?
That was when we went on the RV trip. She was 10 by the time we got on the boat.
Okay, so 10-year-old daughter. I mean, traveling around for 2 years. I mean, what was I know there were a lot of challenges. What was probably the most terrifying moment of that?
Well, I could tell you two moments on the boat. And my husband, who is clearly the captain, he has an awful lot of sailing experience. Um, Two times when I was afraid on the boat, my husband will tell me, and he did tell me at the time, you are not unsafe, you're uncomfortable. Big difference between being uncomfortable and being unsafe. Um, the first time was steeper waves, they came closer together. And so it was just an uncomfortable situation for the boat to be in. And I was nervous. And my husband sat me down and said, we are not in an unsafe situation. Our boat can handle these conditions. It's us, it's the humans who are not very happy with how uncomfortable we are right now. The second situation, we had gone aground. We had purposely taken kind of a skinny waterway, and we knew there was a possibility of going aground, but we hadn't gone aground. And I'm running around handing out life jackets and all concerned about things. And my husband finally looks at me and he jumps in the water. And because we're aground and we're a very shallow bottom boat, that water came up to below his knees. We were not going to drown in that water. I was just, again, uncomfortable. So a lot of times what it did was it made me really face my fears. Like, am I afraid? Am I truly afraid for my life or for my daughter's life or my husband's life? And when I really looked at that, there really was not much fear. We're pleasure sailors. So we had access to very good weather forecasting, and pretty much good weather forecasting is available now. So we did not end up in horrible storms. If it was bad weather, we just stayed put. There was no need for us to go.
Okay.
And then in terms of being afraid in different environments, I have a mom, and my mom worries about me, and she worried about her grandbaby and being in places that we didn't know and alone, and a lot of those things. And truly, the two most dangerous places that we ever were in the entire 2 years were Washington, D.C. and Miami. I mean, when you think about it, like I was much more likely to be a victim of some sort of a crime in one of those big cities than I ever was out on the waters.
That's true.
Yeah, when you boil it down to logic, it's kind of easy to not be.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, what advice would you give to families considering embarking on a long-term selling adventure?
First off, learn how to sail. That is something I still don't do very well, believe it or not. I can handle the boat. I can handle the boat in an emergency. Like I know how to bring the sails down and I know how to use the radio and turn the engine on and I know how to get where I'm going if there's an emergency. And, for us, the worst emergency would be if the captain went overboard. So I would say start small. There are people out there who jump right into a big adventure like this. Now, my husband had decades of sailing experience. And so I may sound like I don't know what I'm doing a whole lot on a sailboat. And that's kind of true. But he and I had together done an awful lot of planning of trips and different types of things long before we decided to hop on a boat. A lot of people come out there and decide they don't like it. So my first suggestion is to try before you buy and maybe go on a charter, go down to the Virgin Islands or the Bahamas or someplace like that and charter a boat. If you have sailing skills, you can charter what's called a bareboat. And that means that you just rent the boat and then you provide the sailing expertise and all the cooking and provisioning and stuff. You can also hire with a captain and crew. And, so pick your level of expertise. Figure out where you spend your money. That's one of my biggest suggestions to people. Often hear people say, I could never afford a trip like this. One of the things that we did was we went through and tracked every single expense we had. And then we looked, where could we cut it out? And it's amazing. $5 cup of coffee every day adds up.
Yes, for sure.
I was guilty of I would buy any book I wanted on Amazon. And so I started using the library. Well, it saved a fair amount of money when you get someone who's a big reader. So those are a couple of things. Try before you buy, figure out where your money's going. And if this is something you want to spend it on, I have a lot of practical advice in my book, how we did it, not how everyone should do it. But again, it's just some of the things that we did. I ended up going back to work. My husband, I had been at home with my daughter for a while. And so when she was in third grade or 8 years old, and we decided to do this trip, we had been self-employed. And so we paid for our own insurance, medical insurance, which is not exactly an inexpensive thing. And so we decided that if I could go back to work and get our medical care covered for 2 years, that would be a huge savings for us. And so we went through and we just basically figured out how to make the money work.
I like that.
I'm sure you enjoy each other too.
Yes, that's for sure. For sure. So with that, so how were you able to incorporate your love for gardening into your travels?
Well, we decided that we were not, some people take plants or plant herbs and things like that. We decided we did not want to deal with dirt. So I just really took a 2-year sabbatical from gardening. However, I turned it into kind of my love of cooking and, kind of the care and feeding of my crew. And I learned how to bake bread. I learned how to make yogurt. I made homemade granola. People eat everywhere. They just don't always eat the same things that we do. And what you will find is ingredients are available, prepackaged meals or something like a Bisquick. If you're making pancakes or waffles, you may not be able to pour it out in an easy mix and just add 2 ingredients. But guess what? I have those 8 ingredients on board and we could make them, make our own pancakes. And, my daughter learned how to cook on board and, everything is from scratch. So it was kind of a different, I shifted it around and I started to do a lot more on the cooking side than the growing side.
Yeah, I mean, that's, just thinking about that, just realizing like a lot of times people don't understand the things that they can go without or the different ways that they can do certain things, until you're in a situation like that where you're planning something that you really want to do and then you realize, okay, I don't have the the normal convenience that I would have being inside of a house. So, I may have to do this, or I may have to sleep on this rough bed inside of this boat, or or
I don't
whatever.
know. I love my bed.
Right.
Much more comfortable. It's much less of a vacation and more of a lifestyle change. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand. I mean, you often, sorry about that, you often will have way more time to do the thing in your life. Like cooking is like that's kind of what you do with that day. Um, but it's a very comfortable place. It's kind of like having a little baby condo. Everything is miniature, and there's a sailor, years old sailor, who one of his quotes is you find out how little you need when you live on a boat. And it's so very true. You don't need 6 pairs of pants. I have a pair of pants and a pair of jeans, a couple pairs of shorts, and dress, the things that you don't need. You find out what you don't need on a boat. But it's not all, cocktails and sunsets. Of course, there are beautiful sunsets and beautiful sunrises, and, cruisers do enjoy cocktails. Most of us do anyway. Not every day is like that. So it's more of a changed lifestyle than it is a 2-year vacation.
So going through that, like, after you return back, did that make you have maybe like a more of appreciation for the things that you do have, or realize, or what did you realize? I guess it would be a better way to phrase it. What did you realize about your lifestyle that differs from before you took that 2-year adventure?
Well, I'm most appreciative of the machines in my life. I still caress my washer and dryer every time I walk by them. And that magic machine in the kitchen where you put dirty dishes in and press a button, clean ones come out. Okay, so yes, a much bigger appreciation for the eases of life. I have been desperately trying to simplify and minimize since I got home. Sadly, about the time that we got back, my mother became quite ill and ended up moving in with us. And so I ended up with 2 households worth of stuff in my house. And I have felt overwhelmed since I got off the boat. And all I want are clear blank spaces. And so I've been trying to minimize. So in that way, yes, it absolutely changed my view of things. We had miles of counter space in the kitchen. I don't know who decided we needed all that because it just has to be cleaned. Oh, and it's like we live with, I don't know, 3 feet of counter space on a boat, and somehow we end up having fabulous meals.
You made it work. That's what matters,
Yeah.
All right. So can you share an unexpected discovery or skill that you developed during your sailing adventure?
Cooking. I did not come into this marriage as a very good cook. I pretty much ate baked potatoes, and that was about the only thing I knew how to really cook. And so I started cooking a little bit when I got into this marriage, and then like transferring all of these skills. I gave up my gardens for the couple of years, and so I turned around and made it about cooking. Learning how to bake bread and how easy it is. I would make a loaf of bread every 2 or 3 days on board. And I'd never in a million years thought I would be baking bread. Same thing with yogurt, granola. You can make your own tortillas. Did you know that?
I've heard it. I've heard it before. I've never seen it be done. But
Yeah. And so, yeah, learning that I really could just take limited number of ingredients and create all kinds of things in the kitchen. That was kind of a huge discovery for me. I also learned I didn't need to be pampered, that I could live kind of a rustic life.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you won't see a lot of people, out there on a boat. You don't have as much. You weren't able to bring certain things with you, like like if I'm not sure if you are, but some people like to wear like a makeup or things like that. So you probably weren't able to bring all that type of stuff. You just had to bring, like you said, a pair of jeans and a pair of pants.
Yeah. Very limited jewelry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did miss, even as a stay-at-home mom, I sometimes miss dressing up, going in, dressing up for work or things like that. And, so every once in a while you're like, I'm going to put on some lipstick, which was about the sum total of my makeup. I think I'm going to put on some lipstick and drag out a piece of jewelry and put on a dress. And then, of course, you're sitting on a boat.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, okay.
So during that time frame, I know you explained how, you know, how you and your husband were after the fact. How did that affect your daughter being on the boat for those 2 years?
It's interesting. We purposely left when she was 10. It's a good age for most young girls. They want to be with their parents. They're excited about newness. So it was a good time and a good age. And then we planned the trip so that when we came back, we'd be going into junior high. And for us, that's seventh and eighth grade. And it's three towns that come together in our junior high. So it was a transition time. So we planned it on purpose that way. We were probably out about 6 months longer than the queen girl would have wanted to. You kind of have a limited lifespan. I don't know if you've had kids, but you really hit that period, and kids need to be with their peers more than they do with their parents. And it's a very natural progression. Now there are some families that make it work staying out cruising, during all stages of their kids' lives. I certainly know some families that have been out there. I know one family that's been out for 13 years. I know one family that has a 13-year-old who's never lived on land. There are people out there, but they're anomalies. They're not the couple years, people pop in and out of cruising for a couple years at a time. 2, 3 years, 5 years is kind of a long time. You see a lot of 6 months, 9 months. And then you see a lot of seasonal cruisers doing like kind of what we are doing now, where they go out for 2 or 3 months or even up to 6 months. And so you see a lot of that, and you don't see the long term. And some families make it work. Our daughter, as an only child, needed to be with friends. And so for us, it was perfect coming back. Um, my only goal was that she went into junior high marching to her own drum. And she did do that. Very independent, kind of never got caught up in all the drama of junior high and high school. She had a tight group of friends. They called themselves the no drama llamas. They just, weren't into, you hear a lot of stuff. Girls can be not so nice, and junior high and high school can be a brutal time for kids. But she seemed to sail through that, and, notwithstanding the fact that I was pretty sure I was going to ruin her academically, she did all right in that area too.
So, can you discuss the differences between traveling as a couple and traveling as a family?
Oh, as a couple, he's responsible for himself, and I'm responsible for myself. You know, I pack my bags, he packed his bag. When you're traveling as a family, hallelujah, we only have one child. So she had done a lot of travel by the time we went on this trip. It depends on the family, but there's a lot more logistics that go into it when it's a family. The whole homeschool. This last time when we went to the Bahamas, we had no homeschool. We had this entire locker that was empty because it had been filled with homeschool supplies. The books we were going to use, and, just paper and art stuff, and, different things that we'd be using for homeschool. And, so just the idea of my husband and I traveling, it was so easy. He packed his bags, I packed my bags. He dealt with the tools and the spare parts, and I dealt with the food and galley stuff. And we, had our boat documents, and we went. When you're dealing with a child, we had to deal a lot more with, we carry a pretty extensive first aid kit. And so dealing with the pediatrician, and we'd get, a dozen different types of antibiotics that you carry on board, and just things like EpiPens in case you had an allergic reaction, and steri strips in case you had a major wound that needed closing, and some of those types of things you worry more as a parent. Like, I don't know, I can take care of myself and he can take care of himself, but here's a kid that we're responsible for. So I think it's more of a little more pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. Those parenting skills is like those parent senses, should I say, go to another level. It's like, okay, I know I can take care of myself. I know he can take care of himself, but I need all of this for her.
Exactly, exactly. So the first aid kit, I noticed that this last time I went out, yeah, we have still have a robust first aid kit, but it was nothing like when you was a child.
Um. So what are some key lessons from your sailing adventure that you apply to your current life on land?
Make plans, don't plan the outcome. That's probably one of the biggest ones. I find that my biggest source of unhappiness lies between something that I expect and reality. So you can plan all you want, but you can't plan how it's actually going to happen. So kind of learning to be more in the whatever is, that's not my nature. I'm a big time planner. So a little more flexibility in my life, a lot more self-sufficiency. One of the things that I discovered as we were planning for this is that, yeah, there are other boats around you. And, there's the big emergency. If your ship is going down, we have what's called an EPIRB, and that's a worldwide satellite, where somebody, helicopters come to get you. But in between that is an awful lot of what you have to take care of yourself on a boat. There's nobody there, no cleaning lady to come in and clean the boat. There's no electrician or diesel mechanic or handyman, plumber. All of those jobs you take care of within in your little crew. And so you have to have those skills and bring them on board with you. Teaching school. It's no teacher.
So what island or place would you have next on
Mm.
your travel bucket list?
On my travel bucket list, just not necessarily by boat, correct? Just go into
Yeah, not necessarily by boat.
Greece is definitely on there.
I heard it
New
was.
Zealand. I really want to get to New Zealand and Australia, but gosh, you have to have a lot of time because it's so far. Croatia. That was a new one that I added not so long ago. I have some friends who are in Croatia right now, and I just keep thinking that I need to get there. Italy. I haven't been to Italy since I was 19, and I'd love to go back and experience a lot more of it. My daughter, you teach a kid to travel and they travel on you. And my daughter's in university in Scotland. She's at University of Glasgow. And so we've been using her as a great excuse to go explore all kinds of places. We went on a vacation to Edinburgh and the Highlands of Scotland. And then just this past fall, we went to Ireland and met up with her in Ireland. That was a pleasant surprise. I had no idea how much I'd left Ireland. I don't know. You could just, there's so many places to go.
Yeah, I mean it is a lot of places on this earth to be able to visit, and
Okay.
most people in their lifetime probably won't touch all those places, or maybe even
No,
have.
but the more you'll actually go to. I know we won't get through our bucket list, but when you plan the trips and actually look hard at the saving the money for it and making it happen, I'll get to many more of those places than the people who don't do the planning.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So speaking of planning, we're gonna kind of wrap it up with this. Speaking of planning, what message do you hope that readers take away from Crew of Three about pursuing bold dreams and detailed plans?
Well, my motto is dream, plan, do. So I hope that readers think about what their dreams are, or listeners think about what their dreams are, and they don't have to be the same as mine. It could be as you know doable as a weekend of camping if you've never done it. So make a dream, do the planning, and then go for it. Do it. Life is too short. My husband has the saying, you may have a chance to travel again later, but you can never travel again now.
He's right. He's right. So, before we get out of here, is there anything that you want that we maybe didn't cover, or that you just want to say to the listeners out there, before we head out?
Oh, I'm sure there's so much more I could share. Read everything you can about any place you can. Even for those of us who don't ever get to all the places we want to go, you can read about them in books. You can read about them in historical fiction novels, um, travel guides. I read everything I can about every place I want to go. And I like to learn about the people, the cooking, the food, the terrain, the climate, everything about it. So I would encourage people to read about the places they want to go visit.
Okay. I want to take this time out to say that I appreciate you coming on the show today, talking about your life experiences. You and your family having this amazing adventures. By sea and some by land as well. Um, so yeah, once again, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Yes, oh yes, no problem. So everybody out there watching, you guys go to the description or the show notes, and you'll see, all of Miss Kimberly's information, whether it be her social media, things like that, where to get her book at, and go buy it, go purchase it, go, follow her on social media, comment on her videos. I mean, just go support her in any way possible. I mean, go ask her where is her next trip that she's going. Go do all that. So, but yes, thanks everybody for tuning in. You guys have just watched another episode of All in All with Alex, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.